Hello, this is Writers at Work, a podcast for readers and writers about the joys, heartaches, challenges, and satisfaction of the creative writing process. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. With me today on Writers at Work is Marilyn Fu, screenwriter whose ROSEMEAD, starring Lucy Liu, will open in New York on December 5th. Directed by Eric Lynn, ROSEMEAD had its premiere at this year's Tribeca Film Festival and has been nominated for a slew of awards at such festivals worldwide. I've seen ROSEMEAD and found it deeply affecting and disturbing. I want to tread lightly because it is a finely woven tale I don't want to spoil. I'll ask Marilyn how we should proceed in discussing it. Marilyn Fu is a graduate of Columbia University's School of the Arts, where she became the first recipient of the William Goldman Screenwriting Fellowship. As a reporter, she wrote for many Time Inc. publications. She wrote the screenplays for the 2014 thriller, The Sisterhood of the Night, based on a Stephen Mullhauser short story, and the 2018 film The Honor List, in which 14 girls cope with the death of a friend. Moving forward, Marilyn wrote for the TV series The BAXTERS, and is a writer for the COPENHAGEN Test, a spy thriller to premiere in late December on Peacock. As for ROSEMEAD, Marilyn received a 2025 Golden Horse Award nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay, one of Asia's highest honors in cinema. ROSEMEAD is the story of a Chinese-American mother and son in Los Angeles whose lives are unraveling, mostly in secret from each other. It is based on a series that appeared in the Los Angeles Times. Marilyn Fu, welcome to Writers at Work.
I'm glad to be here.
Marilyn, I mentioned in the introduction how I wanted to tread very lightly when discussing ROSEMEAD. In your screenplay, the story of Irene, played by Lucy Liu, and her son Joe, played by Lawrence Cho, doesn't so much unfold as it unravels. In Act 1, to my mind, the story turns abruptly on two words, one that describes Irene's condition and one that describes Joe's. Can I mention them without spoiling the moment for the viewer?
I think that's okay.
Okay, let's give it a try. The word for Irene is cancer. The word for Joe is schizophrenia. I have to say that I was drawn to the movie, but both of those words, the way they were delivered, hit me like a punch. How did you write those scenes? I mean, we sense something's not quite right, but those words hit so hard.
It was always a question from the start of when to reveal to the audience that Irene has cancer and that Joe has schizophrenia. And we did play around with different ways and different timelines of doing that. You also have to know that in this timeline, Joe's father, he also had cancer and he had just passed away. And so you really have this family that is struggling with so much suffering from the past. And then as we go into the film, we're in the present and they're still struggling. This is what makes Irene's cancer coming back. This is what makes it so incredibly difficult and why she does not bring Joe into the experience for so long.
You know, when you say to somebody that the moment was shocking, you know, that's a word that has lost all meaning, really, I think. But
I agree.
it was shocking. I mean, you know, I had already had sympathy for Lucy Liu's character Irene because she was working so hard trying to keep her business going, and she appeared to have some sort of cough. And meanwhile, Joe is a teenager, and he's being, he's taking a test, and somebody wants him to cheat, and he's undergoing teenage stuff. So something isn't quite right. But then came the reveal. And again, you know, that word shocking doesn't quite do it, I don't think.
Yes. And I think when you're taking an audience on this kind of emotional journey, you also have to figure out What is the most emotionally resonant way and time for them to find out these two pieces of information, the cancer and the schizophrenia? And we also need to be clear. We don't want to confuse anyone. So those were some of the challenges for sure.
Yeah, and what I found unsettling is how quiet the film is. When you were writing your first drafts, um, did you see the quietness as an ally, the silence and the ambient sounds as an ally? They encourage such intimacy.
Usually, when I'm writing, I have a playlist. I'll have specific songs that I'm listening to that help me get into the world of the story, the world of the characters. And for this one, I did not have that playlist. And so I'm interested in you mentioning the quietness of the film. I think that the quietness actually comes from the original article by Frank Chang. He writes it in a way that I think he's an incredible writer, and he just uses words in a staccato way and a way of describing the events that lend to that kind of quietness.
Yeah, and just as a sidebar, you can hear every word spoken by the characters. Which is a great relief. And I suppose as a writer, it's a tribute to that the director and producers let your words carry the moment.
I feel that this film really captures my words. And I
Great.
mean that in the highest compliment to the director Eric and to our producers and to the cast because I just that doesn't happen very often and it's a very special feeling to have.
Yeah. I don't want to leave you writing yet, but you mentioned Frank Chang's series in the LA Times. When did you become aware of it?
In 2017, I got an email from our producer, Minette Louie, and I was actually standing in line to get my marriage license. And
Oh,
she said, I've teamed up with Andrew Corkin and Theo James. There's this article, LA Times article, and they're really excited about turning this into a film. Would you take a look at the article? And so I'm waiting there with my soon to be husband, and I just can't stop reading this article. It's just fascinating. And it was coming to me at a time when I was actively searching for the kind of complicated, gritty, nuanced role for an Asian woman specifically. This was something I was seeking out. And I had written Asian characters before in my work, always ensemble pieces where they were one small portion of the ensemble. And I just was hungry to find that kind of role. And so it was just everything I was looking for.
so your background as a journalist, what did you think of the way he told that story? I think you alluded to it a few minutes ago. I found that it read like an outline and that it was almost impressionistic. And I thought that was a really powerful way to tell that tale.
I agree. It to me, it felt cinematic. And I don't think that that was on his mind at all, because when he was approached about turning this into a movie, he was just speaking about this the other night that he was skeptical. He thought, well, I don't think this is going to happen. So he wasn't writing for that. Yet to me, when I read it, because he doesn't try to over explain or overwrite, I feel the emotion of the characters more, of the people who were living it.
Yeah, and I think that his sparseness um, reflects something that you do in your screenplay. Um, for example, at one point in his story, he points out that the woman on whom Lucy Liu's Irene is based, quote, was taught that a son's troubles are a mother's sole responsibility. And then Irene's friend says, mothers, we are the most miserable people in the world. Um, and the way he wrote that story, those sentences just stand out on their own. They kind of scream at you. And so, I mean, those two sentiments, did they reflect your autobiography? Growing up, did you have that impression of a heavy burden on mothers?
Well, I will say now that I'm a mother, I was pregnant with twin boys very quickly after I came on to write the script. So essentially, I was writing the script as a new mother, knowing I was going to get double duty very soon as my first foray into motherhood. So a lot of that was playing through everything that I wrote in the script. Now they're 6 years old, and when I'm really mad at them, this does resonate in my this echoes through my mind that mothers are the most miserable people in the world. And it wasn't until I went back to Frank's article that I realized it was from his article. It was
Right.
just something that had come back to me. It's sort of the greatest joy, and I wouldn't say the greatest misery, but it's two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
And I do think that as people, we can't, our capacity to love grows when our capacity to understand the suffering also grows. And that is what I think is so fascinating about Irene.
Yeah, she's an amazing character, and for someone who's not Chinese American, um, I struggled to get on her wavelength, and it occurred to me countless times um, that this woman is carrying way too much burden. That she's got to offload this on someone. But as you show us, no one can really get that close to her, so she can do that.
I come from a generations of women who have been very strong and very independent. I'm sure in ways that not everybody liked, but also in ways where they were able to survive and their families could flourish. So my grandmother, she uh, was divorced at a pretty young age from her husband, from my grandfather. And at this time, it was scandalous in Hong Kong because nobody does this. And so all the kids, including my mom, went under the custody of my grandfather, even though he had a lot of issues that he was dealing with. My grandmother did not get custody. So what does she do? She somehow finds the willpower and the determination during these times to set up her own dress shop in Hong Kong. And so she ended up having this thriving business, uh, designing and sewing clothes for a lot of expats who lived in Hong Kong. And she did this as a divorced woman, separated from her children, still trying to see them and care for them as much as she could until the time when they could be reunited.
Mm.
And I see that this passed down to my mom, who, my dad passed away when I was a freshman in college. And so she was left to raise two daughters on her own in this country, having come over from Taiwan. And, you know, she made it happen. She put us through school, through graduate school. She's still supporting me in every possible way, emotionally, um, financially. She helps me as a writer. There's so many ups and downs, and she's always been there for
Sure.
me. And so they're very tough choices, I think, that these women have had to make. And they haven't always been pretty. They haven't always been the ones where you say, oh, yeah, I would do that. So there's something about that being passed down through the women in my family that I can see a thread of that in Irene.
Parenthetically, when did you decide you want to be a writer? And I'll follow up with that question if you don't mind.
I've always loved writing. My
So
first
I'm sorry to interrupt, but then let me follow up. You always wanted to be a writer. Therefore, did you see this as material when you were growing up? Did you have a keen eye toward, boy, something is different in my little family?
You mean in things that I was interested in writing about?
Correct.
Well, I would say that when I first began writing, especially screenplays, that some of the first efforts at screenplays did not reflect me at all. Uh, the protagonists were male. The protagonists were white and female. I hadn't reached a point yet where I could put myself into the story, where I could say, there's something interesting about me and my experience that is worth doing the deep dive on. That was a process.
Yes. This comes up time and time again in these conversations, that it takes writers a while to understand that their story is the one they need to tell.
I wonder why that is so complicated.
Me too. Because once you do that, I mean, certainly in my novels, I discovered this. Once the first time I did it, I was never going to write about anything else again. It was just a matter of how to use that material.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, you know, you tapped into something in Rosemead that I had only learned about recently, and that is that Asian American families are the least likely among all racial groups to use mental health services. And
Yeah.
we see Irene, as you depict her, at first reluctant to participate in Joe's treatment. Um, how did you develop Irene's character as she moved from, shall we say, deliberately ignorant to a passive participant to someone who develops her own tragic form of treatment for Joe? Is it a form of growth? I'm not sure it's a form of growth on Irene's behalf.
Well, it would be tricky to look at it as a form of growth because of where we end in a
Yes, yes,
story.
yes.
I think with this story, I was asked this question the other night at a Q&A. We were showing the film in San Diego at the film festival,
Ah,
and someone asked if I had ever considered a different ending or if the team had ever considered one. And the answer is no, because we always knew it was going to end here, and we're not changing reality. And we're
yes.
not going to show you another part, an extension of the story after this act that's going to make you feel better because it would be too simplistic. It's a very complicated, thorny, challenging story and characters that we're grappling with here.
Yeah, and never mind that it is a based on a true story. Your story is also true, in the sense that for my mind as a viewer, I didn't detect a false note. Nothing seemed forced. If you had gone in a different direction and changed her evolution, boy, I think you would have undermined your whole project.
I'm glad that you feel that way, that there's truth in the movie. It was certainly at the forefront for all of us.
Yeah, I don't. As I'm sitting here, I don't know. No, no, no. That no, you did it. Just never mind. Um, you convey Irene's isolation so well, and again, we're talking about writing quietness.
Yes. Well, my husband, he'll joke that, yeah, I'm not someone who talks a lot. So when he reads my work and my screenplays, a lot of times you'll see that there are these silences. My first film was called The Sisterhood of Night, and that's a riff on The Crucible. It's adapted from a short story by Stephen Mullhauser. And the entire crux of the film is about a group of girls who want to be silent. And so when I see that film, it still calls to me because I love silence.
Yeah, I don't, and how you utilize it very well. I mean, um, what leads me to the question of how was it working with Lucy Liu? I mean, I don't know that she's ever played a character like Irene.
She just transforms, and it's really astounding, I think. Lucy came on board to the project just the year after I had done my script work. And she really dug deep with this. And she had great input. She not only on the script, but on the film overall. And I think that my husband is an actor, so
Ah,
I
okay.
also see a lot of what goes into his process. And I think as an actor, you're sort of the last stop before the film gets to an audience of you were saying, Jim, that you felt that there was a lot of truth in the
Oh
film.
yeah, yes.
Well, as an actor, if there's something false in the script or a false moment, she's the one who has to make it believable or not. And so I loved that she became involved and was a producer so early on, because it really allowed her to say, hey, I had a part in there where Irene's character has a fling with someone that she meets at the hospital. And I remember Lucy saying, I just don't think that she would do that, because I think that she's already dealing with so much shame and she's already hiding so much with her community. To add on another thing that she's hiding is just not authentic. And I think she's right. And so there were pieces like that that got taken out.
Mm. She's working so against type here. I mean, I think if you stop somebody on the street and say, describe Lucy Liu, they might talk about her action roles, where she plays larger than life superhero type characters. Here she is so quiet and so drawn inwardly, and she does so much with her face and the sadness in her face. Um, as a writer, how do you lead the actor toward that form of expression?
So there is a thread through the whole movie, as we talked about, that there's hiding, there's shame. It's all underneath every moment. When Irene and Joe are with their communities, you can see the lies, you can see the covering up, especially in Irene's community, her generation. And so my job is at the script level to create those scenes where the actor knows that it's clear that this is the undercurrent. So the scene where they go to the party for the newborn
Yeah.
and you see Irene in the kitchen with these other women who are gossiping about her. So through that scene, I'm using plot to say, hey, this is what the theme is. There is shame, there is covering up. And then Lucy, as the actor, has to embody that. And what I saw in her performance was I saw her holding things in a lot. Just her physicality is almost like collapsing in. A lot of times she is biting her fist or sort of putting her hand over her mouth as if to keep something in. And that's the physical way that she's able to express the theme that I tried to put in as plot, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Did you do you offer that type of advice? Were you on set the whole time?
I was not on set.
Okay.
I was in a writer's room during that time on a show.
Yeah. Um, so tell us about Joe, the son.
Joe, Joe, similar to Irene, but I think on an even deeper level, was a mystery box. And the director, Eric, and we did get to speak to and interview some of his classmates.
Hmm.
We got to know him a bit better, but ultimately we saw that he was really isolated. And so these people were outside of him, and they could only tell us what they saw on the outside. So
Right.
we knew that he really wanted to swim. So that became something in the film. He had been voted most shy at school, but he turned it down because he didn't want his photo taken for the yearbook. From these details, you start to see a picture of somebody. He was obsessed with Dylan Roof. And so we know that as a basis. And then we know from Frank's article that there were these small signs of violence going around in the house that were unexplained. Again, like I said, he was a mystery. So I have to piece together the things I can find about him and find who he is.
Right. So as I after I watched Rosemead, I watched The Honor List, and then I watched a little bit of the Baxters, and it occurred to me that you write young people very well. Um, why is that?
That's a good question. I think that for and I'd love to hear what you think as you approach your writing. There seem to be these phases where when I'm looking back at a certain time in my life, it's very alive because the emotions I felt during that time were so deep and they're still with me. And so when I was writing those pieces that you mentioned, I could tap into that time. It felt like it was yesterday. Also, I journal write a lot. So
Mm,
I think that kind of imprints on me. Now I'm in a different phase of life. And interestingly enough, I don't think that it's not that teenage time anymore. It's not that younger time. I'm now looking back at my time when I was in my 20s, and that
right.
feels very alive. And I feel like I have something to say about that.
Yeah, I think, I'm overburdening this with psychobabble, but I think we all have a sweet spot in our memory. My most recent novel was the first time I've ever written about somebody my age. In all the previous novels, most of my characters were in their late 20s into their mid 30s. And that was really an important period for me. And I remember it very acutely. I remember my emotional state at that time. Um, I just wonder if you just have some sort of fiber optic link to those memories that you can tap into of what it was like to be young. And I think to be young is to be troubled anyway. So, you tap into the troubles that these teens have very convincingly.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's just we're writers, so we can talk like that to each other.
And
We never, we
I
never, we never brag when we're talking to each other.
and how fascinating that you have your first book now written for that age,
Yeah.
that
Um,
you were ready to do that.
well, look at your body of work. Before you were a mom, you were a kid, and you write these young people um, from that point of view. Um, I don't know that it ever goes away, frankly. And I think that's a great resource for writers, by the way. Let me be very clear about that. I think that an ability to tap into a prior time period so acutely is a great asset. And I think that's one of the things I liked about Joe. He seemed really real to me, even though I don't know anything about schizophrenia. I don't know that I've ever met anyone with schizophrenia, but Joe seemed very relatable to me.
Well, Eric has talked about how Lawrence came to be cast as Joe. And one of the things he said is that, well, first there were 600 or so submissions for this role, and Lawrence uh, got this role. It was his first, feature acting experience. So truly a feat. And Eric has said that there was something about Lawrence where you just weren't sure what he was going to do. He felt raw. And there were other great auditions, but there was something in those other auditions where you could just have a sense, there was a familiar sense to it, but there wasn't with Lawrence. And when I watch him in the film, I feel that too, that there is a universe inside of him that's playing out. He's struggling to show us only the parts that he wants us to see. And I think it's just a beautiful performance.
It's very affecting. So let me ask you, is it too soon to talk about the Copenhagen test?
No, I'd love to talk about it.
So let's do. I mean, sci-fi spy thriller. That
That's right.
seems pretty far away from Rosemead.
It does in a way. I think that as writers, whatever project we go on, there's going to be some thing in it that you can deeply tap into. Otherwise, there's no point in being involved. So the Copenhagen test is still, it might feel like a universe away from Rosemead, but I don't see it that way. It's a different genre and it's wildly entertaining, which is all good.
Right.
The thing to me that hooked me was that you have Simu Liu playing first generation Chinese American. Um, you have the wildly entertaining part, which is that his brain has hacked. Uh, you don't know who this unseen enemy is, and he has to put on a performance in order to find out who is behind this. At the heart of that, though, is a Chinese American intelligent analyst, and he is being suspected by his own country. And so it raises questions for me about being Asian in America and the things that we have to do to finally prove that we love this country, we are meant to be here, and that shouldn't change if something political comes up or if COVID takes over our entire country, that we're Americans and we belong here. And so that was my way into the Copenhagen test.
Oh, that's excellent. Because Asian Americans were under assault during COVID.
Yes. Yes, it was certainly a time where, there's always good things that come out of these moments. And I think there was a lot of visibility around that anti-Asian hate that can be an undercurrent and simmers.
Mm-hmm.
And then COVID was a time when a lot more people could see that it's there.
Do you look for projects that let you cross genre?
I would say more, it's not that I look for them, but that they're a necessity. I feel like our industry at this moment is asking for it. And so part of my job is to find something I can be passionate about that the industry is asking for, and the industry is asking for genre. So it's been that way for a long time, but I'd say at this moment it feels especially persistent in that.
I want to direct our listeners to your website, marilynfu.com. Do you remember the 3-word line that appears under your name?
Actually, Jim, it's marilynsfu.com. My middle name is Shi Yan, and so that's where the S comes from.
Oh, good. Thank you for correcting that. No, it'd be terrible if they were searching and they wound up elsewhere. MarilynSFu.com. Do you remember the 3-word line that appears under your name?
Is it I Tell Stories?
Yes, exactly.
Still on there? Okay.
Yes. Oh, I love that. It's so fantastic. Well, there it is.
That is in a nutshell what we do, right?
That's right. It's perfect. It's perfect. You can spend years trying to do something better than that, and you're not going to do it. I Tell Stories. My guest on Writers at Work has been Marilyn Fu, screenwriter, whose very moving Rosemead, starring Lucy Liu and Lawrence Shu, opens in New York on December 5th and elsewhere shortly thereafter. Marilyn, thanks very much for joining us on Writers at Work.
Thank you for this conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Writers at Work is a production of Bliss Publications. Erin Mitchell is our producer. Music is by Joni Mitchell, performed by Keith Jarrett. For more, see writersaTworkpodcast.com. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. Until next time, happy reading.